Plug your headphones and listen. The road stretched endlessly into the dark abyss of the night, swallowed by the thick fog that clung to the air like a suffocating blanket. The headlights of the car pierced through the mist, revealing only a narrow path ahead, winding and deserted. The driver, a man named Daniel, gripped the wheel tightly, his knuckles white against the leather. His breath was slow, measured, yet the silence around him felt unnatural, oppressive. The clock on the dashboard flickered 2:47 a.m. The numbers glowed red, pulsating like a heartbeat. The radio crackled, a faint whisper of static, then silence. He reached out, turning the knob, but only eerie white noise greeted him. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. Just an old highway, nothing but his mind playing tricks. Then, in the distance, a figure appeared. A woman, pale, barefoot, standing in the middle of the road, her long black hair flowing in the windless night. Daniel's heart pounded as he slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched. The car lurched forward, stopping just inches from her motionless body. He sat there, breathing heavily, his pulse a hammer against his ribs. The woman didn't move. Her face was obscured by her hair, but something about her felt wrong, as if she didn't belong to this world. Daniel hesitated before rolling down the window. "Hey, are you okay?" His voice wavered. No response. The woman tilted her head slightly, her hair shifting just enough to reveal a glimpse of her face. His breath caught in his throat. Her skin was cracked, dry like old porcelain. Her lips stretched into a grin, unnatural and wide, splitting her face open in a grotesque smile. Her eyes, empty sockets. Daniel's stomach twisted. He shoved the car into reverse, his foot slamming the pedal. The car lurched backward, but the woman, she didn't move. She simply glided forward, faster than he could drive. The engine roared. He shifted to drive, pushing the accelerator to the floor. The speedometer climbed 60, 80, 100. The road blurred past him, trees morphing into dark figures watching from the sides. He refused to look in the mirror. He knew she was still there. Then the whisper came, a breath against his ear. "You can't run from me." His blood ran cold. His fingers locked onto the wheel, his body frozen. The voice, it was inside the car. A sudden, forceful grip yanked the steering wheel. The car swerved violently. The tires skidded. The world flipped once, twice, glass shattering, metal crumpling. Daniel's screams mixed with the unholy laughter that echoed through the wreckage. Silence. The car lay overturned in a ditch, the radio hissing faintly. Smoke curled from the engine, a thin whisper against the black sky. Blood dripped from Daniel's forehead, pooling against the shattered windshield. His breath came in ragged gasps. He blinked, dazed, his vision swimming. Pain seared through his body, but he was alive. He tried to move, his fingers twitched. His legs, trapped beneath the crushed dashboard, wouldn't budge. Then, the crunch of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, From the shattered window, he saw bare feet step onto the glass-covered ground. The woman knelt beside the wreckage, her empty sockets staring into his soul. Her grin widened. She lifted a single skeletal finger and placed it against his forehead. A sharp, searing cold pierced through him. His vision darkened, his breath faltered. The last thing he heard was her whisper, soft and final. "Now, you're mine."
The house stood at the end of Hollow Creek Road, forgotten by time. Its walls, once pristine, were now cracked and weathered, covered in ivy that clung like twisted veins. The windows, dark and hollow, seemed to watch anyone who dared to pass. For decades, no one had lived there. No one dared. Ethan had heard the stories. Everyone in town had. They spoke of strange sounds in the night, shadows that moved without light, and whispers that came from the walls themselves. But Ethan didn't believe in ghosts. He was a skeptic, a firm believer in logic. That night, as a storm raged overhead, Ethan stood before the house, flashlight in hand. The wind howled through the trees, the branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. He hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward. The wooden steps groaned beneath his weight, the old porch creaking as if it were breathing. He reached for the doorknob cold as ice turned it and pushed the door open. Darkness swallowed him whole. His flashlight flickered, its beam weak against the vast emptiness of the house. Dust hung in the air, swirling in the dim light. The scent of rot and decay filled his nostrils. The silence was thick, suffocating. Ethan stepped inside. The floorboards beneath him creaked with every step, each sound echoing into the hollow halls. His breath was slow, controlled, but his pulse betrayed him, hammering in his ears. He moved deeper, passing tattered furniture covered in white sheets, their shapes like shrouded corpses. Then a whisper, soft, faint, almost, a breath against his neck. He spun around. Nothing. A chill ran down his spine. He shook his head. Just the wind. Just his mind playing tricks. He pressed on. The hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long. He counted his stepstone, 20, 30, but the corridor never seemed to end. The walls, once adorned with old wallpaper, were now peeling, revealing something underneath. He stepped closer, shining his light. Scratch marks, deep, jagged lines carved into the wood beneath the paper, like something one had tried to claw their way out. A sudden crash from upstairs. Ethan's breath hitched. The sound was violent, like furniture being thrown across a room. His flashlight trembled in his grip. He should leave. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to turn back, but he didn't. He climbed the stairs, each step groaning beneath his weight. The air grew heavier, colder. His breath misted in front of him. At the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched in both directions, and then the whispers returned, but this time they came from behind a door, the last door at the end of the hall. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He moved forward, the whispers growing louder, overlapping, unintelligible but desperate. His fingers wrapped around the doorknob. It was warm, too warm, as if something on the other side was alive. He turned the handle. The door swung open. Darkness, a void, a room that should have been there, but wasn't. The floor, the walls gone. Only emptiness remained. And then movement. A figure emerged from the darkness, pale, gaunt, eyes hollow pits of black. Its limbs were wrong too long, too thin. It smiled. The whispers stopped. The thing stepped forward. Ethan stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. The air around him grew thick, suffocating. The shadows slithered toward him, wrapping around his feet, his arms. The house was alive, and it was hungry. Ethan tried to scream, but the darkness swallowed the sound. His flashlight flickered, then died. The last thing he saw was the figure lunging toward him, its grin stretching wider than humanly possible. Then, nothing. The house stood silent once more. The wind howled outside, but inside, nothing moved, nothing breathed. Ethan was gone, but the whispers remained.